May 26, 1941. The flight deck of HMS Ark Royal, North Atlantic. Coordinates 48 degrees north, 16 degrees west. The wind doesn't just blow, it screams, tearing the tops off the swells 50 feet below the flight deck. Rain lashes horizontally, stinging exposed skin like buckshot. Sub-Lieutenant John Moffett grips the rim of his open cockpit, his leather gloves slick with oil and freezing seawater. The flight deck of the carrier Ark Royal is pitching violently, the bow rising and falling a terrifying 50 feet with every heave of the Atlantic storm. In front of him sits his aircraft. It is not a sleek, aluminum-skinned Spitfire. It is not a menacing, high-speed Hurricane. It is a Fairey Swordfish, a biplane. To the modern eye, it looks like a joke, a relic that has wandered out of a museum and into the deadliest war in human history. Its frame is covered in doped Irish linen, fabric that you could punch a hole through with a firm fist. It has fixed landing gear that hangs beneath it like the legs of a dead insect, creating immense drag. It has no enclosed cockpit, meaning Moffett and his observer, Flight Lieutenant J.D. Miller, are exposed directly to the freezing gale. The Royal Navy pilots call it the stringbag, not just for the bracing wires holding its wings together, but because, like a housewife's string shopping bag, it can carry any shape of load you shove into it. But right now, carrying a 1,600-pound torpedo under its belly, it looks fragile, absurd, suicidal. "Engine start," the deck officer bellows, his voice barely audible over the gale. The Bristol Pegasus radial engine coughs, spits blue smoke, and rattles into a clattering roar. The entire airframe shakes. This machine tops out at roughly 140 miles per hour in a dive. The German Messerschmitt Bf 109s that dominate the skies over Europe fly 3 times that speed. Luftwaffe aces, when they encounter these biplanes near the coast, often don't even bother to maneuver. They simply slash through them like a shark through a net. They laugh at them. They call them target practice. But there are no Messerschmitts here. There is only the storm, the dark closing in, and somewhere out there in the gray waste, the most dangerous warship ever launched by a European power. 3 days ago, that ship, the Bismarck, blew the pride of the British Navy, HMS Hood, out of the water in 6 minutes flat. One shell, a column of fire that touched the clouds, and 1,415 men were gone. The shockwave of that explosion broke the heart of the British public. Now, the Bismarck is loose. On the bridge of the German battleship, some 100 miles away, the atmosphere is tense but confident. Admiral Gunther Lütjens knows he has taken a hit to his fuel tanks, but his ship is a leviathan of steel and technology. He is racing toward the safety of the French coast. By tomorrow morning, he will be under the protective umbrella of the Luftwaffe. U-boats are already rushing to his aid. He has outrun the British battleships King George V and Rodney. He believes he has won. The German anti-aircraft crews on the Bismarck check their equipment. They are manning the finest naval weaponry in the world. Their fire control systems are state-of-the-art, utilizing gyroscopic stabilization and analog computers to predict the trajectory of incoming enemy aircraft. They are trained to track fast, modern monoplanes. They have tables and calculations for deflection shooting based on aircraft moving at 300 miles per hour. They have absolutely no idea how to shoot down a kite that flies slower than a car on the Autobahn. Back on the Ark Royal, the signal is given. The carrier turns into the wind, her bow plunging into a trough. Green water crashes over the flight deck. Go, go, go! Moffett pushes the throttle forward. The Pegasus engine screams. The biplane lumbers forward, gathering speed agonizingly slowly. The deck is wet and slick. The wind tries to flip the canvas wings over. As the ship's bow rises on the next swell, the Swordfish hits the ramp. For a heart-stopping second, the plane drops toward the Whitecaps. The heavy torpedo drags it down. Moffett pulls back on the stick, his heart hammering against his ribs. The Pegasus bites the air. Slowly, miraculously, the Stringbag claws for altitude, rising into the murk. 14 others follow him. 15 archaic biplanes flying into a Force 8 gale, hunting a 50,000-ton fortress of steel. They are the only thing standing between the Bismarck and her escape. If they fail, the German battleship will ravage the Atlantic convoys, choking Britain into starvation. Moffett adjusts his goggles, wiping away the spray. He can't see the horizon. He can barely see his wingman. The instrument panel vibrates so hard the needles blur. They are flying blind, guided only by the primitive radar of the trailing cruisers and a prayer. They are the laughingstock of modern aviation, and they are about to fly straight into the teeth of hell. May 26, 1941. 2050 hours. Alt, 6,000 feet, descending through thick cloud cover. The world inside the cloud bank is a void of gray turbulence. John Moffett struggles to keep the wings level, his eyes darting between the artificial horizon and the slip indicator. The Swordfish bucks like a frightened horse. The rain here is torrential, hammering the canvas skin of the aircraft with a sound like tearing paper. Inside the open cockpit, the cold is a physical weight, pressing through the shearling flight jacket, numbing fingers that need to be precise. Through the voice pipe, the tinny voice of J.D. Miller, his observer, crackles. Radar contact from the Sheffield. Target is 10 miles ahead. We're going down. Moffett throttles back. The squadron leader, Lieutenant Commander Eugene Esmond, signals the dive. One by one, the Stringbags drop out of the safety of the clouds and into the cauldron below. They break through the cloud base at 700 feet, and there she is, the Bismarck. Seen from the air, she is terrifyingly massive, a dark, jagged island of steel carving through the white-streaked ocean. She is maneuvering violently, heeling over as she turns, churning the sea into a frothing wake. Even from this distance, the muzzle flashes of her guns are blinding. On the deck of the Bismarck, the situation is one of disciplined panic. The alarm gongs are ringing incessantly. Flieger alarm, port quarter. Battery commanders scream coordinates. The ship bristles with weaponry. It carries a dense thicket of anti-aircraft guns. 16 105mm heavy flak guns, 16 37mm semi-automatic cannons, and 18 20mm machine guns. It is a curtain of steel designed to shred modern, fast-moving attackers. The German gunnery officers are the elite of the Kriegsmarine. They peer through their optical finders, tracking the incoming specs. Their fingers dance over the dials of their fire control computers, analog marvels of gears and gyros designed to calculate the lead angle for an aircraft moving at 250 or 300 miles an hour. They feed the data to the guns. The barrels swing, tracking the trajectory. Fire! The sky erupts. To Moffett, it looks like the air itself is catching fire. Black puffs of exploding 105mm shells bloom in the path of the squadron. Tracers from the 37mm cannons arc through the gloom like angry, glowing hornets. The noise is deafening, audible even over the roar of the Pegasus engine. But then Moffett notices something strange. He watches a string of tracers slash across the sky, aimed perfectly where his aircraft should be. But the tracers pass harmlessly 200 yards in front of his propeller. Next, a heavy flak shell detonates with a concussive crump, but again it bursts far ahead of the leading Swordfish. On the Bismarck, the gunnery officers are shouting in confusion. "Too fast! The lead is too much!" The fire control computers are failing. They simply cannot compute a solution for an aircraft flying this slowly. The mechanisms are hardwired for modern warfare, for the speed of the age. They cannot account for a biplane struggling against a 40-knot headwind, effectively crawling over the water at a ground speed of barely 60 knots. The Swordfish are flying so slowly that they are falling off the bottom edge of the German firing tables. The apex predator is swinging its fists at a ghost. Moffett pushes the nose down further, diving toward the wave tops to get under the heavy flak. The Swordfish shudders as the airspeed indicator creeps past 100 knots. The wind whistles through the bracing wires, the music of the stringbag. Now the smaller guns open up, the 20mm Oerlikons. These don't rely on complex computers. They are aimed by the naked eye. "They're transversing," Miller yells from the back seat, transversing his own single Vickers machine gun, a pea-shooter against a battleship. The air around them fills with lethal debris. A piece of shrapnel tears through the lower left wing. John sees the hole instantly, the sunlight shining through the fabric. But the Swordfish doesn't buckle. The doped linen skin allows the high-velocity rounds to pass clean through without detonating the sensitive contact fuses designed to explode against aluminum. If Moffett were in a Spitfire, the wing would have sheared off. In the stringbag, it's just another draft. "Steady, John. Steady," he whispers to himself. He is now at 50 feet. The ocean spray coats his windscreen. The Bismarck looms ahead, a wall of gray steel growing larger by the second. He can see the individual sailors on the deck running to man the railings. He can see the massive 15-inch turrets swinging, their barrels lowering to fire into the sea, to create massive splashes, trying to swap the biplanes out of the air with walls of water. The first flight of Swordfish has already dropped their torpedoes. He sees geysers of water erupt alongside the battleship. But the massive ship turned sharply, combing the tracks. They missed. It is up to the second wave. It is up to Moffett. He banks the biplane, ignoring the tracers zipping past his head like fireflies. He needs to get closer. The torpedo drop parameters are strict. Altitude 20 feet, speed 90 knots, range less than 1,000 yards. If he drops too high, the torpedo breaks. Too fast, it dives. Too far, the Bismarck turns. He has to fly straight and level into the mouth of the guns. The Bismarck fills his entire field of vision. The superstructure towers above him like a skyscraper. He is so close he can see the grimaces on the faces of the flat crews. The smell of cordite and burning oil floods his cockpit. Not yet, he grits out. Not yet. The tracers are hammering the fuselage now. Thwack, thwack, thwack. He feels a stinging sensation in his leg but ignores it.
He lines up the iron sight. He is aiming for the bow, trying to anticipate the giant ship's turn. "Let it go, John! Let it go!" Miller screams. Moffat's thumb hovers over the release button on the throttle quadrant. The gray wall of the hull is right in front of him. He presses the button.
May 26, 1941, 21:05 hours. The stern of the Bismarck. The instant the 1,600-pound torpedo drops free, the Swordfish bucks upward violently. Released from its burden, the biplane wants to climb, but Moffat wrestles the stick forward and kicks the left rudder hard. He banks the aircraft so steeply that the wingtip seemingly grazes the foam of the waves. He has to get out now. He is skimming the water at barely 60 feet, flying directly away from the battleship. Behind him, the air is still thick with tracers. The German gunners on the aft deck depress their barrels, furiously trying to track the retreating Stringbag. But again, the geometry of the engagement baffles them. Moffat is flying so low that the guns can't depress enough to target him without hitting their own railings. The biplane vanishes into the dark mist and the sea spray, a ghost fading into the storm. In the water, the weapon, an 18-inch Mark 12 torpedo, begins its run. It is powered by compressed air, leaving a distinct bubbly wake. It travels at a sluggish 40 knots. On the bridge of the Bismarck, Captain Ernst Lindman is calm. He has seen the splash. He orders a hard turn to starboard. He intends to comb the tracks, to turn the ship parallel to the torpedo so it slides harmlessly past. The massive battleship responds, leaning into the turn, her screws churning the water white. For a few agonizing seconds, it looks like the maneuver will work. The torpedo seems destined to miss the hull. But the Bismarck is swinging her stern around, exposing her most vulnerable point. The torpedo isn't tracking the thick armor belt amidships, where it would have done little more than scratch the paint. It is heading for the very back of the ship. 21:05:30. The impact is not a sharp crack, but a deep, resonant shudder that is felt through the soles of every sailor's boots, from the bridge to the engine room. A massive column of water, mud, and oil erupts near the stern. The explosion tears a hole in the hull the size of a garage door. But the blast damage to the outer skin isn't the killer. The shock wave travels inward, hammering the steering gear compartments. Deep in the bowels of the ship, in the steering gear room, chaos erupts. The blast shears the coupling of the port rudder assembly. The massive steel rudder, weighing tons, is violently slammed over to the left, locking at a 12-degree angle. The machinery groans, metal screaming against metal, and then jams solid. On the bridge, the helmsman fights the wheel. "Rudder is not responding, Captain. She is stuck to port." Lindman's face drains of color. "Countersteer. Starboard engines full ahead. Port engines stop." He tries to steer the ship, using the differential thrust of the propellers, a desperate move to force the nose straight. The engineers in the turbine room scream orders, shutting down valves and opening throttles. The massive ship shudders as the horsepower imbalance fights the drag of the jammed rudders. It doesn't work. The Bismarck, The most powerful warship in the Atlantic begins to turn, slowly at first, then with increasing inevitability. She is no longer heading toward the safety of Brest and the Luftwaffe air cover. She is carving a giant, slow circle in the middle of the ocean. High above, circling in the gloom, John Moffat wipes the sweat and oil from his eyes. He looks down. He can't see the rudder, but he sees the wake. It is curved. The straight line of escape has become a loop. "She's turning," Miller crackles over the voice pipe, disbelief in his voice. "John, look at her. She's turning right back into the wind." Back on the Bismarck, the realization sets in. Damage control teams scramble to the stern, but the steering room is flooded. The hatch is buckled. They are trapped in a slow turn, heading directly back toward the British fleet they had spent 3 days outrunning. Admiral Lütgens stands on the bridge, looking out at the dark, storm-tossed horizon. He knows what lies in that direction. The battleships King George V and Rodney are closing in. He has the guns to fight them, but he cannot maneuver. He is a sitting duck. He turns to his communications officer. "Send a message to High Command." The officer readies his notepad, his hand trembling. Lütgens dictates quietly. "Ship unmaneuverable. We will fight to the last shell. Long live the Führer." The mighty Bismarck has been crippled, not by a 14-inch shell from a battleship, nor by a dive bomber screaming from the heavens. She has been brought to her knees by a canvas-covered anachronism that flew so slowly the Germans couldn't figure out how to shoot it down. The Stringbag has caught the shark. May 26, 1941, 22:15 hours. Approach vector to HMS Ark Royal. The attack is over, but the danger has only shifted forms. John Moffat is no longer fighting German flak. He is fighting physics and the Atlantic Ocean. The flight back to the carrier is a lonely, freezing ordeal. The adrenaline that surged through Moffat's veins during the torpedo run has crashed, leaving him shivering uncontrollably in the open cockpit. His fuel gauge is tapping the red line. The Stringbag fights a headwind that has increased to gale force, meaning his ground speed is barely 50 knots. It feels like he is hovering in place, suspended in the black void between the storm clouds and the angry sea. "Do you see her, J.D.?" Moffat yells into the voice pipe. "Nothing yet, John. Just rain." Finding a ship in the middle of the North Atlantic at night, with no moon, radio silence enforced, and heavy rain is akin to finding a needle in a haystack while wearing a blindfold. If they miss the Ark Royal, they will ditch in the freezing water. Survival time in the sea tonight is measured in minutes, not hours. Then a flicker. A faint homing beacon signal breaks through the static, and then a glimpse of a shadowed shape below. The Ark Royal. From 1,000 feet, she doesn't look like a sanctuary. She looks like a toy tossing in a washing machine. The stern of the carrier is rising and falling, a staggering 56 feet with every swell. It is a pitching deck landing, the most dangerous maneuver in naval aviation. "Signal lamp is green," Miller calls out. They're ready for us. Moffett enters the circuit. He lowers the hook. He watches the batsman, the landing signal officer, standing on the port side of the deck, illuminated by dim hooded lights. He holds two illuminated paddles, fighting the wind to keep his footing. He is the only link between Moffett and a safe landing. Moffett lines up the biplane. The deck heaves up toward him, then drops away into a dark abyss. If he comes in too high, he'll miss the arresting wires and crash into the safety barrier. If he comes in too low, the rising stern will smash the swordfish out of the air like a fly swatter, killing them instantly. He has to time the ocean. He throttles back, the Pegasus engine burbling. The batsman's paddles are steady, steady, steady. Suddenly, the batsman crosses the paddles across his chest. Cut! Moffett chops the throttle. The swordfish drops like a stone. For a terrifying second, there is only the sensation of falling. Then, crunch! The landing gear slams onto the steel deck. The hook snags the third wire. The harness digs into Moffett's shoulders as the aircraft is jerked from 60 knots to 0 in less than 40 feet. The tail rises, threatening to tip over, but the wire holds. Men rush out from the catwalks, struggling against the wind to secure the wings. They look like dark ghosts in their oilskins. Moffett kills the engine. The silence that follows is heavier than the roar. He climbs out, his legs numb, his knees buckling as he hits the deck. He is greeted not by cheers, but by the grim, anxious faces of the deck crew. They don't know yet. Moffett stumbles into the briefing room. It is filled with cigarette smoke and the smell of wet wool. The other pilots are there, faces pale, hands shaking as they hold mugs of hot cocoa laced with rum. Commander Esmond looks up. "Well," Moffett says, his voice raspy, "we got a hit. Amidships, I think. Maybe further back." "Did you see it stop?" "No, sir. She was still moving when we turned away." A heavy silence settles. If the Bismarck is still moving, she will escape. The sacrifice, the terror, the frozen hands, it might have been for nothing. Then, the squawk box on the bulkhead crackles to life. It is the voice of the captain of the Ark Royal, relaying a message from the cruiser Sheffield, which is shadowing the German giant in the darkness. "Attention all hands! Signal from Sheffield. The enemy vessel has reduced speed. She is making erratic maneuvers." A pause. The static hisses. "Correction. The enemy vessel has turned. She is heading north-northwest. She is heading directly toward us. She seems unable to hold a course." The room erupts. Men are slapping Moffett on the back. North-northwest means the Bismarck has turned away from France. It has turned back into the Atlantic, back into the trap. Moffett sinks into a chair, the exhaustion finally overtaking him. He looks at his hands. They are still trembling. He thinks of the massive steel wall he flew against, the wall of fire that should have killed him. He doesn't feel like a hero. He just feels cold. Outside, in the howling dark, the Bismarck continues her slow, agonizing circle. The rudder is jammed at 12 degrees port. Her engineers are welding doors shut, trying to shore up the flooding, but the steering gear is destroyed. The great beast is wounded, thrashing in the water, waiting for the hunters to arrive. And they are coming. The battleships King George V and Rodney are steaming at full flank speed, their 14-inch and 16-inch guns loaded and ready. The execution is set for dawn. May 27th, 1941. 08:47 hours. The horizon, 12 miles off the Bismarck's bow. The sun rises over a rough sea, illuminating a scene of hopeless disparity. The Bismarck, once the gray ghost of the Atlantic, is dragging herself through the waves at a painful 7 knots. She is listing to port. Her crew is exhausted, deafened by the storm, and resigned to their fate. On the horizon, the shapes of the executioners appear. HMS Rodney and HMS King George V. The Rodney is an ugly, powerful beast, a battleship carrying massive 16-inch guns, the largest in the Royal Navy. She is not here to negotiate. She is here to finish what the biplanes started. Open fire, orders Admiral Tovey from the bridge of the King George V. At 08:47, the Rodney fires. The sound is not a bang, it is a geological event. The shock wave flattens the water around the battleship's hull. 3 shells, each weighing as much as a small car, arc through the sky, sounding like tearing silk as they break the sound barrier. On the Bismarck, the return fire is ragged. Because her rudder is jammed, the German ship cannot hold a steady course. She yaws unpredictably in the swell. Her sophisticated fire control computers designed for precision duels are useless when the ship itself is swinging like a pendulum. Her shells splash harmlessly wide of the British ships. The British shells do not miss. The first hits devastate the Bismarck superstructure. A 16-inch shell strikes the forward control post, killing the gunnery officers and destroying the main rangefinders. In an instant, the Bismarck is blinded. She is a boxer with her hands tied behind her back and a bag over her head. What follows is not a battle. It is a demolition. For 90 minutes, the British fleet rains steel onto the German battleship. They closed the range from 12 miles to point blank, less than 2 miles away. At this distance, the shells don't just penetrate, they shatter the armor plate. The Bismarck's guns fall silent one by one. Her funnel is riddled like a sieve. Fires rage from bow to stern, turning the interior into an oven. Yet she does not sink. The German engineering is too good, the compartmentalization too effective. She is a burning, floating wreck, a steel coffin for 2,000 men, but she refuses to go under. High overhead, a lone swordfish from the Ark Royal circles the carnage. The pilot looks down at the burning Leviathan. It is a horrific sight. The pride of the Kriegsmarine, the ship that terrified an empire, has been reduced to scrap metal because of a single torpedo hit to the rudder. The contrast is mind-bending. The most expensive, technologically advanced weapon system on Earth, undone by a canvas plane with an open cockpit. Cease fire. The order finally comes. Torpedoes. The cruiser HMS Dorsetshire moves in like a coup de grace. She fires 3 torpedoes into the burning hull. The Bismarck shudders. The list increases. The port rail dips below the waterline. May 27th, 1941. 10:39 hours. Coordinates 48 degrees 10 minutes north, 16 degrees 12 minutes west. The end of the Bismarck is not a glorious cinematic moment. It is a slow, agonizing capsize into the crushing depths. From the deck of HMS Dorsetshire, British sailors watch in a stunned, reverent silence. There is no cheering. The adrenaline of the chase has evaporated, replaced by the grim reality of what it means to destroy a ship of this magnitude. The German Leviathan rolls slowly to port. As she turns upside down, a terrifying sound echoes across the water. The groan of tortured steel, followed by the massive splash of her 4 main turrets falling out of their barbettes, gravity tearing the 1,000-ton guns free from the hull. The stern plunges first. For a brief moment, the bow points toward the sky, a final tombstone marking the grave of the Third Reich's naval ambition. Then, with a rush of trapped air and a swirl of debris, she is gone. The surface of the Atlantic is left churning with oil, wreckage, and heads, hundreds of them. The water is 55 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to kill in hours, but warm enough to prolong the suffering. The sea is covered in a thick black layer of fuel oil. It coats the eyes, mouths, and lungs of the survivors. Men are screaming, praying, and blowing whistles. They are the debris of an empire, floating in the wake of the invincible ship that promised them victory. "Rescue stations!" The order rings out across the British decks. The HMS Dorsetshire and the destroyer HMS Moore move slowly into the slick. The killing is over. The sailor's code now takes precedence. Ropes are thrown over the side. Scramble nets are lowered. The British sailors, who just minutes ago were loading shells to incinerate these men, now lean over the rails, extending hands, shouting encouragement. "Grab the line, Fritz! Come on, lad!" Down in the water, it is a scene from Dante's Inferno. Desperate hands claw at the slippery hull of the cruiser. Men, weighed down by sodden uniforms and boots, struggle to climb the ropes. Their strength is sapped by the cold and the shock. British sailors lean dangerously far over the side, grabbing wrists, hauling the enemy bodily onto the deck. One German sailor, a boy no older than 18, is pulled onto the Dorsetshire. He collapses, coughing up black oil, shivering violently. A British petty officer throws a blanket over him and offers a cigarette. For a fleeting moment, the war is suspended. There are no Nazis or Tommies here, just mariners surviving the ocean. They pull 86 men onto the Dorsetshire. The Moore rescues another 25. There are nearly 800 men still in the water, bobbing in the swell, waiting for their turn. Then, the lookout on the bridge of the Dorsetshire screams the 2 words that freeze the blood of every sailor in the North Atlantic. "Periscope, starboard beam!" A shape in the water, a trail of bubbles, a U-boat. The captain of the Dorsetshire has a split-second decision to make. It is the most brutal calculation of command. If he stays stationary to pick up the Germans, his ship is a sitting duck. He risks 800 British lives and a heavy cruiser to save the enemy. He doesn't hesitate. "Full ahead! Clear the area!" The telegraphs ring. The massive propellers of the cruiser begin to turn, churning the water.
In the water, the German survivors see the white foam kicking up at the stern of the British ships. They realize what is happening. The ropes they're reaching for are pulled up. The steel walls they hoped would save them are moving away. A wail goes up from the ocean, a collective scream of disbelief and terror. Men swim desperately toward the departing ships, only to be washed away by the wake. On the aft deck of the Dorsetshire, British sailors look back with horror. They can see the hundreds of arms waving in the distance. They can hear the faint cries over the roar of the engines. They have to leave them. They have to leave them to the hypothermia and the silence. Within minutes, the British ships are hull down on the horizon. The 800 men left in the water are alone. The U-boat alarm was likely false, a trick of the light or a piece of wreckage, but the result is absolute. Of the Bismarck's crew of over 2,200 men, only 114 survive. Miles away, on the flight deck of the Ark Royal, the Swordfish pilots are landing from a patrol. They know nothing of the horror in the water. They are tired, hungry, and looking forward to a hot meal. They park their string bags, the canvas wings fluttering in the breeze. They walk past the sleek, modern fighters that did nothing, past the dive bombers that missed. They pat the noses of their obsolete, slow, ridiculous biplanes. They have no idea that they have just rewritten the rules of naval warfare forever.
May 29th, 1941. Gibraltar. The Officers' Mess, HMS Ark Royal. The storm has passed. The Ark Royal is docked. The seas are calm, and the sun beats down on the rock of Gibraltar. Inside the mess, the atmosphere is a strange mix of exhaustion and disbelief. The pilots of 818 Naval Air Squadron are debriefing, nursing drinks, staring at the wall maps. They are alive. Against every statistical probability, against the finest anti-aircraft defenses in the world, not a single swordfish was shot down during the final attack on the Bismarck. They flew canvas kites into a volcano, and they all flew back out. John Moffat sits quietly. In time, historians and tactical analysts will pore over the logs. They will calculate angles and drop times. They will determine that it was likely his torpedo, the one launched at point-blank range into the port quarter, that jammed the rudder. He will become known as the man who sank the Bismarck. But right now, he is just a pilot who is grateful to be dry. He thinks about the German sailors he saw on the deck. He thinks about the technological disparity. The sinking of the Bismarck sends a shockwave through the naval ministries of the world. It is the death knell of the battleship era, though few realize it yet. For centuries, the measure of a nation's power was the size of its guns and the thickness of its armor. The Bismarck was the apex of that philosophy, a floating fortress designed to be invincible in a surface engagement. But the Bismarck was destroyed not by a bigger ship, but by the smallest, slowest, cheapest weapon on the battlefield. The German inquiry into the loss is filled with bewilderment. How did the flak fail? The answer, buried in the technical reports, is a bitter pill for the master engineers of the Third Reich.
Their fire control systems were simply too advanced. They were marvels of prediction, designed to lead fast modern monoplanes. They could not conceive of an enemy flying at 85 knots. The Swordfish survived because it was an anachronism. Its obsolescence was its armor. The Stringbag becomes a legend. The Fairey Swordfish was supposed to be replaced in 1940. It looked like a joke next to a Spitfire, yet it outlived the biplane era. It outlived the Bismarck. In fact, the Swordfish will go on to outlive the very aircraft designed to replace it, serving in frontline combat roles until the very last day of World War II. It will hunt U-boats with rockets. It will protect convoys in the freezing Arctic. It will continue to defy aerodynamics and common sense. But its defining moment will always be that gray, stormy night in the Atlantic. Epilogue. The Deep. Today, the wreck of the Bismarck lies 15,700 feet beneath the surface of the Atlantic, sitting upright on the side of an underwater volcano. The guns are still trained out, silent sentinels in the eternal dark. The swastika on the deck is still visible, preserved in the cold, oxygen-poor water. It is a monument to hubris. It is a reminder that in war, technology is not always the deciding factor. Sometimes, victory doesn't go to the fastest, the strongest, or the most advanced. Sometimes it goes to the ones who are brave enough to climb into a canvas bag, fly into a hurricane, and refuse to turn back. As the sun sets over Gibraltar in 1941, the flight deck crews of the Ark Royal are already patching the holes in the linen wings of the Swordfish. They are doping the fabric, tightening the bracing wires, prepping the engines. The war is far from over. The Stringbags have more work to do. John Moffat survived the war. He passed away in 2016 at the age of 97. He kept a piece of fabric from his Swordfish in his pocket for the rest of his life.